Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and God, we'd love to have a little post-game talk or anything just based on where we stand right now. We are in September. Big Ten not playing football at this point. Other leagues have started. I'm going to bring in our co-host, Griffin Strom, talk a little bit about what is going on in this topsy-turvy world in terms of the Big Ten's pursuit or lack thereof of playing a football season. You know, Griffin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know, we just got some big personnel news as it relates to Ohio State's roster. We'll get into that as well. I'm ready to talk some potential Big Ten football, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of crazy. We, you know, if you go back and you look at the situation, and you know, there's no reason to rehash everything, but Ohio State, you know, they see their schedule get gutted. They go to a conference only schedule. I mean, honestly, they should be heading to Eugene, Oregon right now. It would be week 2 of the season. They'd be getting ready to play the Ducks, but even that would be in question because of the fires out there on the West Coast right now. That schedule gets tabled, and then a new schedule comes up and lives for a grand total of 6 days, because from the time that the Big Ten releases its schedule and then pulls the plug on everything. I mean, they should be playing a home game against Rutgers this weekend, but wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, and you know what's really bizarre is just seeing how you know, every other sport is coming back now, and for a while it was kind of like, okay, like, you know, professional sports is one thing, but you know, these college players are not getting paid, so it's like, with the health issues, you know, can you really trot these guys out and stuff like that? But I mean, yesterday I was driving around in Grandview, and you know, go past like a girls soccer game, for example, like a high school women's soccer game. I know when we were on our way back from Chicago, we drove past like a packed high school stadium for a high school football game of some sort. And then last night, you know, I'm just, you know, watching the NFL kickoff. I'm watching, you know, the NBA playoffs are going on. You've got Miami open up the ACC season and whatnot. And I'm just like, at this point, like, it would almost be bewildering if the Big Ten didn't, you know, in my opinion, kick this thing into gear here pretty soon.
It really seems to me as if these Big Ten presidents and chancellors are like, we're gonna quadruple down here. We're not moving off of our stance, and that they are, you know, I don't want to get into a point of where people are where I'm putting words in people's mouths and, oh, you know, libel, slander, etc. But it seems like they're probably hoping that these other leagues that are going forward run into some complications. I mean, let me be clear. Nobody is going to sit there and say, well, we hope a bunch of positives happen, you know, in terms of, you know, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about actual young men who are out there playing the sport, not, you know, not Madden characters or anything like that. But they really just seem like they have just doubled and tripled down to the point of that they think that their science is right and that they are so right and that everybody else is wrong, and that the only way that they're going to be exonerated is for everything else to fall apart.
Yeah, and you know, you talk about that in just yesterday, a report came out from NJ.com that said the Rutgers president specifically, and he's a new president, Jonathan Holloway. I believe he's been on the job since the beginning of July, and he came out and basically did exactly what you're saying, which is to double down and basically say that, you know, if a revote is happening, he's not changing his vote. So that's one school that you can count on to not be in support of a quick fall restart for the Big Ten. But I don't think that comes as much of a surprise that, Rutgers, one of the least obviously competitive teams in the Big Ten, wouldn't be pushing quite as hard as a school like Ohio State or Penn State, Michigan, schools like that to get back on the field.
This takes me to Ryan Day's statement that he released on social media on Thursday, and I'm going to read the last little paragraph of it. These young men and their parents have asked so many questions that I don't have an answer to. But the one that hurts the most is, open quote, why can these other teams and players play and we can't, close quote. Duke is playing Notre Dame and Clemson is playing Wake Forest this weekend. Our players want to know, why can't they play? I mean, your thoughts on Ryan Day's statement?
I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it seems like at first it was kind of like, okay, like we aren't going to be able to play because of the circumstances that are happening, right? But the fact that all these other schools and leagues are playing and so many sports are back up and running now, it's kind of like, well, you can't play because of the conference you're in, not because of the circumstances that are happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And, just to paint a little bit of a wider picture here, this statement came out on the heels of the weekly coaches call. And to say that the call was contentious would be an understatement. I hear bits and pieces, coming out of the call. I mean, not direct quotes per se, but I hear about the tone and things. And Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin certainly were not very happy with the league. And Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren allegedly was on this call, and I can't say that about all of them because there have been calls that I know that it's come out that he wasn't on, and the coaches were wondering where the hell he was, in Minneapolis in front of his personal wall of accolades. I don't know. But, I certainly think that the timing of Ryan Day's statement tells a lot coming right out of a call where I guarantee you nothing was sorted out, because if anything was sorted out, we would know more at this point. And the frustration has got to be just coming off the charts.
Yeah. And one of the things, about the fact that Ryan Day, put this statement out is that, we talked to parents of these Big Ten and Ohio State parents protests and gatherings over the last few weeks and whatnot. And kind of a recurring theme was that the parents kept saying, like, the coaches and administrators and players can't exactly speak their full mind on this subject because, they have these ties to the Big Ten. They work with the Big Ten. So maybe they can't fully express their, viewpoints or frustration, disappointment, etc. And I think the fact that you saw Ryan Day actually put out a statement of his own, because we haven't heard from him in a little while. I think that really shows kind of like a bubbling over of frustration and disappointment to be like, okay, like, actually, I will say something. I'm not going to hold my tongue. I don't need the parents to speak for me. You know what I mean? It reached that point where he felt like he needed to put himself out there, and he said in the statement disappointment in the communication from the Big Ten.
Right, and of course, and we'll get into this on the other side of the break. There are people out there that are trying to dispute the fact. People from a mile high that are on the national side who are saying, well, you're leaping to conclusions that there hasn't been communication. Well, I have not found a person in this market who believes that there has been any communication. I've not found a person in the Big Ten who's been covering this entire situation who believes there's any communication. But I'll get to that one in a minute, because this leads better into this. I think Ryan Day's frustration is he's trying to keep his team together in terms of all the personnel, whatnot. I mean, we know Sean Wade is in Florida right now. He will only come back if there is an October season. Ohio State had its first departure today with the news that All-American offensive guard Wyatt Davis is opting out to go to the NFL draft. And that certainly is a big hit for whenever this Ohio State team comes together, be it October or some less desirable later date.
Oh yeah, I'm almost surprised. Part of me is somewhat surprised that there wasn't a single opt out on the team prior to this. But obviously, the first one here is a huge domino to fall because obviously Wyatt Davis is coming off of a first team All American season. in his first full season starting at guard for Ohio State. And this summer too, he was elected to that Big Ten All-Decade team. I really felt like, he was gearing up to just have this, huge season where he was going to get a ton of national recognition, if he hadn't already. And he was named a team captain as well. And you're named a team captain, and that might make things harder to kind of opt out on the team. What is it, like a month later, basically. But I mean, I certainly can understand the decision. It would certainly, let's say something happens where a revote happens and suddenly Ohio State is expected to play here mid to late October or something, and Wyatt Davis has just opted out. That's gotta be kind of a punch in the gut, for sure. But I think that's also, motivation or reason for people to really want the Big Ten to really start kicking things into gear, because it's like, let's say we don't hear anything after this weekend. Does that mean a Justin Fields or a Sean Wade at that point just says, I'm going to opt out as well?
Yeah, exactly. So we don't know if this is a one-off or if there'll be more, but we'll talk about what's next for Ohio State and a couple other topics on the other side of this quick break. Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Griffin Strome, and a lot going on, but at the same time, we don't really know anything better. I wanted to get back to the point about Wyatt Davis. So he's off to the NFL now. I mean, he will train, sign with an agent, all of that. What's next for Ohio State? You sit there and you look at an offensive line that really only seemed to have one question mark as we were going into what should have been the normal season, and that was going to be the one tackle position with Thayer Munford holding down the other spot. Mm-hmm. If nobody else from the line leaves, and again, that's a big if, but, so you're going to have Josh Myers at center. You're probably going to have Harry Miller at the one guard position. It creates an interesting discussion about the other guard position. Is that Enoch Vemahi's position? Is Matthew Jones has been in the program a little bit longer? The thing I'll say about Enoch is that, he was going to only come to Ohio State for the 1 year and then do his 2-year LDS mission and then come back. He's opted against doing that. He was the next guard off the bench, if you remember right from last season. Where does Ohio State turn?
Yeah, you've also got Gavin Cupp is in that conversation as well. As a graduate guy. Enoch, obviously a younger guy. A lot of the times with some of the offensive line, the experience kind of takes precedent a little bit. A lot of the time to wait for those guys to get some years under their belt before they jump in there. But yeah, those are the names right there. Matthew Jones as well. I think people would be more excited about Enoch just based on he's a young big guy out of Hawaii, highly ranked guy as well. I don't know, man. It's tough, and it's also. You say if nobody else leaves, but I think that's a big if as well, because I feel like you could see a Josh Myers or a Thayer Munford, those established guys that can make the leap to the NFL. Obviously, playing a season would greatly benefit them, and probably more so than a Wyatt Davis, who might have the least to prove out of those three in terms of his NFL draft stock. But if those guys also decide to leave too, then that would create or even if one of those guys, if Josh Myers leaves, for example, then you probably slide Harry Miller back to center, and that leaves 2 guard spots open for guys, that haven't had a ton of, legitimate experience like in big moments for Ohio State on that offensive line.
Right, and then we have the one tackle position with NPF and with Paris Johnson and with DeJuan Jones, and if Thayer were to leave, then you're really looking at a completely rebuilt line at that point. But
yeah.
We have to get to a season first. Whether or not that's an October season, a November season, a January season, no season, I mean, we really don't know. And it brings me a point that we kind of talked to on the front side of the break, where I think when you look at the Ohio State football beat media, there's been kind of a consensus in the reporting that the Big Ten has not done a very good job of communicating. You sit there and you look at Ryan Day's statement, and he notes that the communication has not been great. I think you go through what little media opportunities we've had, and it just seems that the topic that's there is things are not being disseminated from the league office down. You have a protest in Rosemont, Illinois, at the Big Ten offices, in front of empty Big Ten offices. We want a Zoom call with Kevin Warren. They don't get that. You have a protest at the North Atrium of Ohio Stadium. Communication. We want communication. You don't get anything there. You go to Ann Arbor. Jim Harbaugh is at the rally there as the Michigan families protest. We find out that Jim Harbaugh has tried to contact the Michigan president various ways. No contact whatsoever. And then, let's stay on that topic first before I get into my other diatribe. It really seems as if the Big Ten has completely dropped the ball in terms of communications. And I'm not going to say that it's a case of them not being able to do the job. I just don't think they really give a crap. I really don't think they care to share their information. I just see this as that classic antagonistic disconnect between academic and athletic, and we'll tell you what you need to know when you need to know it, and until then, just don't you worry about it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the administrator, they thought that things were going to go one way, and thought that people weren't going to question it because there's people dying, the global pandemic. People aren't going to question that. It's going to keep going a certain way, and perception about it's going to go one way, and we're not going to get questioned on it. But what happened was, people are trying to find a way to keep pushing forward, and that's what's happened with all these other leagues, all these other sports, despite the pandemic and doing the best you can during this period. And so people are questioning them, and I don't think they were prepared for that, or prepared to give the level of transparency that people are calling for, in the fallout of all that.
And then that brings me to my next point, where we've seen the Ohio State media and other Big Ten schools, some, Nebraska for certain, maybe not as much in some other markets. They seem to be on the same page with how they're reporting things, with what the tone is. And then, let's just drop in the paratroopers of the national talking head media, who, and again, I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not speaking for the site. I'm not speaking for Griffin. So, if any complaints with what I'm saying, you can email it to me and I may or may not read it, who are swooping in, being spoon-fed things by the crisis PR firm that the Big Ten brought on, carrying the water for the conference, and to the point of where they are attacking the local daily media who covers these teams. And then when fans read that and probably cross the line a little bit in some of their comments, and not even probably, they're crossing the lines. They're saying just some horrible, awful things out there. Just really just thumbing their nose at the people who are out there covering this on a daily basis, and obviously just true shills for the conference message. I mean, it really is. I've said time and time again, they are going to teach classes about how this whole situation fell apart. And I truly believe in J school, in journalism school down the line, they're probably going to have to at least have a week where they're talking about this situation, because I mean, honestly, it's gross. It is gross and disgusting what is happening right now, as some of these national people are just obviously parroting what it is that they're being told. I mean, God, I hope the bag of silver that they're getting, Judas, is worth it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna jump into that one too much. I will say, you've seen I know you've seen headlines and from national people, working for national sites and whatnot, that have been kind of calling for the end of the inevitable end of the college football season, since the Big Ten fell by the wayside. And what you're seeing is that the season is not actually going down in flames for these other conferences. And it seems like games are being played now. Miami just played yesterday. Literally high school games are being played, like, and for some of those people you're referring to, they've kind of been trumpeting the end of the downfall of the season and whatnot, and things are just not going that way. So it's interesting to see how the Big Ten is operating, kind of that the fallout of all of that.
Not going to single out any names, but one of the people that was out there railing on Ryan Day's statement about it being self-serving and things along those lines is listed on the press box seating chart to cover the Notre Dame Duke game. So Big Ten bad for wanting to play. Ryan Day really bad because he's got a good team. Yet this reporter will be in South Bend to cover the Notre Dame Duke game. It just really doesn't sit right with me. I don't know. Maybe I'm too close to the situation. Maybe I'm seeing my livelihood impacted. I don't know. But, I mean, it really just seems like a steaming bowl of horse crap.
Yeah, no, that is kind of a crazy hypocrisy, for sure. But, yeah, I mean, what is Ryan Day supposed to say? No matter how Ryan Day could have the most, be the most paranoid COVID person, behind closed doors or something like that. But the fact of the matter is he's the coach of Ohio State, and if other teams, Ohio State's direct competitors, in terms of the national supremacy in football, are playing, like, what is he supposed to do? He has to advocate for the team playing if these other teams are playing, no matter how he, might feel about it deep down.
So, let's wrap this up by kind of getting into what we're hearing or what I'm hearing, and you can kind of comment on that. I've tried my best on social and definitely on the Horseshoe Lounge. If you're not a member of Buckeye Grove, why the hell not? Come on, let's just do it. About what I'm hearing, and for a while, when we were talking about October football, it seemed like October 10th was the day. Well, it really doesn't seem like October 10th can happen now, but I've heard plans thrown out there where the 17th is mentioned, where the 24th is mentioned. I guess if you go the 17th, you could still potentially do, I think maybe an 8+1, which, 8 league games and a conference championship game. I mean, if you get to the 24th, it gets a little bit more complicated at this point. What is the college football playoff going to look at in terms of data points? I mean, the Big Ten is generally considered, to be just behind the SEC in terms of conference strength or whatnot. But, there are probably not as many good teams in the Big Ten this year as other years. I mean, obviously, if you're breaking your neck to get into October, and I truly do believe at the moment we are recording this at 11:40 a.m., September 11th, year of our Lord 2020, I do believe that we will have October football, subject to change at any moment, because this changes periodically, or not even periodically, regularly. But if they sit there and they break their necks to get to that point, and then they're not able to deliver a team into the college football playoff, I mean, that's going to be a hell of a kick in the crotch at that point. I mean, your thoughts on us getting to an October season and what it might take.
Man, I mean, I'm really hoping that they can. I mean, there's just so many rumors about this revote, and how many votes are going to be required to make that happen. Different presidents saying different things. The Nebraska president, Ted Carter, talking this week. And he said last week, there was rumors last week about the revote happening last week and whatnot. Didn't end up happening, but Ted Carter actually said on that Friday of last week that wasn't going to happen. So his word seems to be good in that regard. And he said earlier this week that a vote will happen very soon. What that vote might actually mean. He was referring to return to play protocols. Who knows if that might be, the whole shebang, or if that's something a little bit smaller, in terms of, we're going to approve, some small step back towards something that isn't quite as, we're going to be playing on the 17th or something like that. But yeah, if Ohio State is playing in the fall months at all and isn't eligible for the college football playoff, I mean, that's just that would just be a real gut punch. But you're saying that they still would be able to be eligible for that if they played on the 17th? Is that like the latest date they would be able to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how many data points, how many games do you need to have in there for it to be meaningful? Will 8 games suffice? I mean, I think that it's easy. I mean, if everybody else were playing 12, I think it would be a lot harder to accept 8. Yeah. But with teams playing 10, if Ohio State were to play 8 or 9, I mean, again, you have to have an open week in there. You're not, I mean, I understand that you've got the guys in 12-hour weeks and not 20-hour weeks right now and whatnot, but you have to have an open week in there. You have to have the opportunity, because we have seen games postponed already. We saw, or we have seen, Oklahoma State, Tulsa move a week because of concerns. We saw TCU, SMU get postponed because of tests. We just heard about Wisconsin going on a 2-week pause because of tests. You have to have some flexibility. I mean, truthfully speaking, our conferences that have 10 and 11 game schedules, are they going to be able to get all 10 or 11 in within this defined framework of what a season is, and the final college football playoff ranking supposed to come out on December 20th? There are a lot of questions that neither of us are going to be able to answer, and really nobody's going to be able to answer, because we just don't know what the future holds in store. But, with each passing week, as the 10th turns into the 17th, and the 17th could turn into the 24th, you're losing the opportunity to play some of these games. And quite honestly, I don't know if the conference championship game is as important this year as in other years, because we don't know if the Big Ten decides to play, do all 14 teams play? Do 8 play? Whatever. I mean, do you really even have divisions? I mean, you're probably lining up to the point of where you're going to have a rematch in Indianapolis, or whatever dome du jour you would have that championship game in. I just think it's important to be able to have enough of a schedule to where you're getting enough variety to play against multiple teams. And when we looked at the first AP ballot, the first AP poll, the preseason one that had Big Ten and Pac-12 teams on there, it showed a lot of strength in the Big Ten Conference. And if those teams were to be reinserted into the rankings in some way, shape, or form, the Big Ten certainly would be better thought of than the ACC after some of the, middle of the road teams fell off because, adult teams showed up.
Right. And I think it's too, the circumstances, the unpredictabilities and whatnot make this season too weird and too, wacky for it to be like, an eight game schedule for the Big Ten doesn't they can't be eligible for the college football playoff because they played 1-2 less games or something like that than some of the other conferences. I mean, that seems a little bit absurd, to be honest, given just how crazy things are this season.
Well, nothing would surprise me at this point, honestly. And in the time since I sat there and said at 11:39 or 11:40 that I felt comfortable, and then within the next 6 minutes I've talked myself down a little bit. So who the hell knows what's going to happen here? But Griffin, I'm going to throw it at you for any final thoughts as we're closing in on the 30-minute mark on the show.
My closing thoughts: I'm remaining hopeful that a season will materialize. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I'm not really rooting for Big Ten football to happen. safely, hopefully, of course. It's for Ohio State, it's not great that Wyatt Davis is opting out, but then again, I think a lot of people would have assumed that someone of his caliber and NFL standing might have even done that sooner than now. So we will see. There's still a lot of questions to be answered. Hopefully, some of these questions might get we might get closer to some of these answers after this weekend, based on some things we're hearing about a potential revote and whatnot. But yeah, we'll be glued to Twitter and the news cycle here for the next few days and moving forward.
Exactly. I have a feeling we'll be recording another podcast here really soon, and hopefully it'll be a more positive message than a negative one. But honestly, we really don't know at this point. So I'm just telling everybody, keep it locked in at BuckeyeGrove.com and be sure to follow everything that we have. Hopefully we'll be able to ramp up and start talking some real X's and O's. But until then, we got you covered with all of your Ohio State needs. I want to thank Griffin for joining us, and I am your host, Kevin Noon, for the BIA podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.